Welcome to our self-study online training. Let's start. Details of ISO 9001 2015 version standard. Clause 5th. Leadership.
In this edition of Micro Learning Videos, let's talk about Clause 5.0 or Leadership. 5.0 in the old ISO version is entitled Management Responsibility. It is the intention of the new ISO standard to put emphasis on the importance of leadership, where top management takes active participation and involvement in the planning, implementation, control, and improvement of the overall quality management system. 5.0 consists of the following: 5.1 Leadership and Commitment, 5.2 Policy, 5.3 Organizational Roles, Responsibilities, and Authorities. Let's talk about 5.1 Leadership and Commitment. The new ISO 9001's emphasis is on leadership. The implementation of quality management system is the organization's strategic decision that demonstrates commitment to the development and application of the quality management system and continual improvement of the organization. This commitment to the implementation of the quality management system must be demonstrated by the organization through informing the business organization and its people and its key stakeholders about the importance of meeting and exceeding customer requirements, compliance with legal and other requirements, establishing a quality policy and objectives, and conducting regular management reviews, as well as providing needed resources. The quality policy is a clearly defined motherhood statement or high-level document containing statements about the overall direction of the business organization and its commitment to quality and customer satisfaction. It serves as a framework for quality objectives. Meeting compliance and regulatory requirements is a vital element. The policy must provide a strong commitment to the continual improvement of the quality management system. The quality policy must be maintained as a documented information, be communicated within the organization, and be available to all interested parties. The last subsection is 5.3 or Organizational Roles, Responsibilities, and Authorities. Responsibilities and authorities must be precisely defined and communicated to all levels of the organization. It is important to know who will do what and what is expected from each and every members of the organization. Accountability and responsibility is clearly defined and communicated across the organization. Leadership and commitment to the quality management system can be demonstrated by top management through the following: constant measurement of the effectiveness of the quality management system. The quality policy and objectives are established per management direction, and it is communicated in the organization and evaluated for progress. The quality management system is part of the overall business processes and not as an additional task or work. Resources needed are planned by the management and addressed. Continual improvement is also emphasized and supported by top management. There is a clearly defined plan to ensure customer, statutory, and regulatory requirements are understood clearly and met by the organization, and everybody in the organization understands why this is important. There is management focus on customer satisfaction. Organizational roles, responsibilities, and authorities are clearly assigned and understood. Expectations are made clearly as to who will do what. Regular conduct of management reviews are also ensured. To know more about Clause 5.0, Leadership in the new ISO 9001,
This is all about leadership. And let's check planning.
Let's talk about Clause 6.0 of ISO 9001-2015 Quality Management System in today's micro-learning session. Benjamin Franklin once said, "By failing to prepare, you are preparing to fail." This is exactly what the ISO 9001-2015 Clause 6.0 on planning is for. Clause 6.0 talks about actions to address risk, quality objectives, and planning to achieve them, planning of changes. Clause 6.0 uses a risk-based thinking approach that correlates with your Clause 4.0. When planning for the quality management system, the organization shall consider the issues or goals referred to in 4.1 and 4.2, where the organization understands the organizational context and the needs and expectations of all parties involved. Clause 6.1, actions to address risk and opportunities. This determines or anticipates the risk and opportunities that need to be addressed. In doing this, the organization will be able to ensure that the quality management system can achieve its intended output, prevent or reduce risks that may affect the organization, and achieve continual improvement. Aside from this, the organization shall maintain documented information regarding these risks and opportunities and create processes for their mitigation within the organization. This is a surefire way to anticipate risks and opportunities as they come and go. Part of the planning includes actions to address risk and opportunities and how to integrate and implement the actions into its quality management system processes and evaluate the effectiveness of these actions. Note that actions taken to address risk and opportunities shall be proportionate to the potential impact on the conformity of products and services. Options to address risk can include avoiding risk, taking risk in order to pursue an opportunity, eliminating the risk source, changing the likelihood or consequences, sharing the risk, or retaining risk by informed decision. Opportunities can also lead to innovation or the adoption of new practices, launching new products, opening new markets, addressing new customers, building partnerships, using new technology, and other desirable and viable possibilities to address the organization's or its customers' needs. When planning its quality management system, the top management must implement and promote a culture of risk-based thinking throughout the organization to determine and address the risks and opportunities associated with providing assurance that the quality management system can achieve its intended results. In order to achieve the end results more effectively, the organization shall establish quality objectives at relevant functions, levels, and processes needed for the quality management system. 6.2. Quality objectives and planning to achieve them. The quality objectives shall be consistent with the quality policy. This includes sticking to your end results and reminding the team to keep their eyes on the prize. Be measurable and make sure that everything done can be subjected to evaluation on whether the target has been achieved. Take into account applicable requirements. Since your quality management system is strictly compliant with all the requirements, whether statutory or regulatory or administrative, be relevant to conformity of products and services and to enhancement of customer satisfaction. Be monitored, be communicated, be updated as appropriate. The organization shall maintain documented information on the quality objectives to constantly remind them of the intended results. Now, what has to be determined in order to postulate the quality objectives to the end results? The organization has to anticipate what will be done, what resources will be required, who will be responsible, when it will be completed, and how the results will be evaluated. The continuity and effectiveness of your quality management system must be substantially maintained in the event of significant changes in your QMS or organization. In case there is change in management, ownership, relocation, technology, product, or shift in customer base. Changes must be carefully planned so as not to disrupt your organization's ongoing capability and responsibility to effectively meet customer and regulatory requirements. Clause 6.3, or the planning of changes. In this particular change, the organization shall consider the purpose of the changes and their potential consequences, the integrity of the quality management system, the availability of resources, the allocation or reallocation of responsibilities and authorities. The ISO9001 2015 requirements provide a strong basis for a management system for business that supports the strategic direction of the organization. Once the organization has identified its context and interested parties, and then identify the processes that support this linkage. Once processes are determined, an organization will need to identify the risks and opportunities associated with these processes. This is why planning is a crucial factor in the quality management system process, because this is where you will base which direction the organization will be steered, and your QMS intends that it achieves the planned end results. To know more about Clause 6.0 or planning, visit our website at www.agfconsultinggroup.com or
Yes. In Clause 6, there is actions to address risk and opportunities. So this concept is first implemented to 2015 version. Let's see more about risk-based thinking.
ISO 9001 was revised in September of 2015. Included in the quality management system requirements is an element called risk-based thinking. Risk-based thinking is required for certification under ISO 9001-2015. Risk-based thinking and improvement have replaced the preventive action section of the 2008 ISO standard. Organizations must plan and implement actions to address risks and opportunities. Those actions must be proportionate to the potential impact of the risk or opportunity. Risk is defined as the positive or negative effect of uncertainty. In the 2015 standard, organizations are required to consider both negative and positive risks and the treatment of both. For negative risk, the organization will surely want to reduce its exposure. For a positive risk, the organization will want to exploit the effects. Uncertainty is created due to the lack of meaningful information related to the knowledge or understanding of an event. Meaningful information is the key term. While many organizations produce massive amounts of information and data, that information and data must be meaningful for the organization to take appropriate actions. We begin our discussion of risk-based thinking with one of the quality management principles covered in the introduction video. The process approach is defined as the system-level view of linkages, interfaces, and process interactions. It applies the plan, do, check, and act cycle with an overall focus on risk-based thinking. PDCA is applied to all processes and the quality management system as a whole. Using the plan, do, check, and act cycle, we are able to consider opportunities as well as risks. Since the PDCA cycle is iterative, the risks and opportunities will change dynamically based upon influences to the organization. The first step in PDCA is to establish objectives. This should be system and process objectives. Processes should have planned outcomes, and they should consistently deliver those outcomes. The do step in PDCA is where the work is accomplished. At this step, the organization will implement and perform the processes while monitoring and measuring results. During the check step, we monitor, measure, verify, validate, and report the information and data that has been gathered by the organization. After these measures and metrics have been captured, the organization will analyze this information and decide if additional actions or a change to the plan is needed. The PDCA cycle may happen several times a day, or it may happen several times a year to support the process approach. Risk-based thinking is defined as the planned and implemented actions to address risks and opportunities pertaining to undesired outputs or outcomes. There are negative risks, referred to as threats. There are also positive risks, known as opportunities. Opportunities should be exploited, while threats should be mitigated to an acceptable level depending upon the risk tolerance of the organization. Risk treatment is the proactive management of risk using countermeasures and controls. Risk is often expressed as a combination of likelihood and consequence. Likelihood is the probability of an event occurring or recurring. Consequence is the possible impact of an event characterized as effect or influence. An effective risk management strategy involves proactive and iterative risk identification, risk ranking, risk treatment, and risk monitoring. Risk identification determines factors that could cause a process or the entire quality management system to deviate from the planned results. Usually, a risk register, risk log, or other risk computer software is used to record the risks. The risk rating places the risks in order based on frequency, likelihood, severity, impact on objectives, monetary consequences, loss of customers, legal exposure, impact on interested parties, and other ranking criteria developed by the organization. Risk identification in the ISO9001-2015 standard begins in Clause 4.1, understanding the organization and its context. The organization shall determine external and internal issues that are relevant to its purpose and its strategic direction and that affect its ability to achieve the intended results of its quality management system. The organization shall monitor and review information about these external and internal issues. Some things to consider when developing the context of the organization, as well as risks and opportunities, are the vision statement, the mission statement, policies, objectives, strategic objectives, strategies, the infrastructure of the organization, the legal exposure, technological challenges, competition, the organizational culture, the geographical location, and the organizational knowledge and performance historical information and data. Next, ISO 9001-2015 requires actions to address risks and opportunities in Clause 6.1. The organization shall consider the issues referred to in Clause 4.1, which is the context of the organization, and the requirements referred to in Clause 4.2, which identifies needs and expectations of interested parties. The organization shall determine the risks and opportunities that need to be addressed. Clause 6.1 addresses risks at an operational level. Some considerations during this process are context of the organization, which is Clause 4.1, the needs and expectations of interested parties, Clause 4.2, the quality management system objectives, processes and controls, resources, improvement needs, customers and customer requirements, organizational changes, product and or service requirements, external providers, audit results, and analysis and evaluation results. The organization should also develop other considerations based upon the specific business environment, including internal and external effects and influences. A way to rank the risks and to capture the risks is shown in this example. In the first column, we capture the issues and risks from internal and external sources. Next, we document the planned results. The next column represents any uncertainty. Uncertainty can be developed through brainstorming and the involvement of other interested parties. Next, we rank the risk according to severity. However, some organizations will use probability and severity to rank their risks. The far right column identifies any potential opportunities that may come from the issues and risks. This is a very simple example. However, it could be used to fulfill the requirements. Remember, ISO tells us what to do, but it does not tell us how to do it. That decision is left up to the organization. Some risk treatments that may be used include avoidance. Avoidance is simply eliminating causes, changing the plans, discontinuing the activities, or otherwise avoiding the risk altogether. Mitigation reduces the event probability, limits the exposure, and reduces the impact to the organization. Mitigation strategies are the most used of the risk treatments. Some organizations may accept the risk. Acceptance takes no action and accepts the consequences. Transference is removing impact and or consequences by reassigning responsibility. An example of transference would be purchasing an insurance policy that would cover the capital outlay or the penalties of a risk. And finally, exploitation. Certainly when we have a negative risk, we are hoping that we can decrease the impact. However, if it is a positive risk, we may very well want to increase the probability and also maximize the possible effects of that positive risk. Another crucial element of risk-based thinking is risk monitoring. Risk monitoring is periodically reviewing identified risks, identifying new risks, both internal and external, ensuring proper execution of planned risk treatments, and evaluating the effectiveness of the actions taken. Risk monitoring can be accomplished using the risk matrix, risk log, or register, and simply reviewing with interested parties to see if there are any changes to the risk. I hope this short video has been helpful in explaining risk-based thinking.
Based on my experience, if you know about FMEA, you can use this for risk-based thinking and analysis methodology. And clause 7, support.
Clause 7.0 talks about support. Your support includes resources, competence, awareness, communication, documented information. One of your support system is Clause 7.1 or resources. Your organization must provide the resources needed for the establishment, implementation, maintenance, and continual improvement of the quality management system. Clause 7.1 resources can be classified as people, infrastructure, environment for the operation of processes, monitoring and measuring resources, and organizational knowledge. Let's get to know your resources. These are the persons necessary for the effective implementation of your quality management system and for the operation and control of your processes. The people are the actors. They keep your organization going. Infrastructure. Your infrastructure is necessary for the operation of its processes and to achieve conformity of products and services. Your infrastructure can include your company's buildings and associated utilities, equipment including hardware and software, transportation resources, information and communication technology, environment for the operation of processes. A suitable environment can be a combination of human and physical factors. This is the context in which your operation can run smoothly. It includes what affects your people and the place where the operations are done. These factors can differ substantially depending on the products, services, infrastructure, and company culture. Monitoring and measuring resources. Monitoring and measuring your resources ensure valid and reliable results. You will then be able to verify the conformity of products and services to requirements that are established. Organizational knowledge. Organizational knowledge is a knowledge specific to the organization. It is generally gained by experience. It is information that is used and shared to achieve the organization's objectives. Organizational knowledge is necessary for the operation of an organization's processes and to achieve conformity of products and services. This knowledge is made available to the extent necessary. This is also helpful when our organization is addressing changing needs and trends. The organization shall always consider its current knowledge and determine how to acquire or access any necessary additional knowledge and required updates. This is one way of ensuring that the organization is also constantly improving and is abreast with the current trends and innovation. 7.2 Competence. It is not enough that an organization has all the resources needed to operate, but it must ensure that these resources are highly capable of fulfilling their assigned task to attain the intended results. The organization has to determine the necessary competence of persons doing work under its control that affects the performance and effectiveness of the quality management system. Ensure that these persons are competent on the basis of appropriate education, training, or experience. It is also important that everyone in your company is aware of the organizational knowledge needed to get him aligned in the shared vision in achieving the intended results. Clause 7.3, awareness. The organization shall ensure that persons doing work under the organization's control are aware of the following: the quality policy, relevant quality objectives, their contribution to the effectiveness of the quality management system, including the benefits of improved performance, and the implications of not conforming with the quality management system requirements. Clause 7.4, communication. Communication is a complex and difficult activity. Good communication can foster a sense of community, teamwork, and a clear sense of purpose and direction. The organization must decide what, when, with whom, and how we will communicate both internally and externally. Problems may arise due to incomplete, ambiguous, or inaccurate information being transmitted, transmission to the wrong person, too late or at the wrong time, use of inappropriate or unreliable media, and other sources. Communication problems are probably the most common cause of quality management system nonconformities. The organization shall determine the internal and external communication relevant to the quality management system. This includes on what it will communicate, when to communicate, with whom to communicate, how to communicate, and who will communicate. 7.5, documented information. The new ISO 9001-2015 standard has removed the distinction between documents and records. Both are now called documented information. As per ISO's definition, the term documented information refers to information that must be controlled and maintained. It therefore expects that you also maintain and control the medium as well as the information. This documented information is used as evidence of conformance. Documented information required by the quality management system and by ISO 9001-2015 shall be controlled to ensure that it is available and suitable for use, where and when it is needed, and it is adequately protected from loss of confidentiality, improper use, or loss of integrity. Documented information of external origin determined by the organization to be necessary for the planning and operation of the quality management system shall be identified as appropriate and be controlled. It is imperative that your processes are well documented as evidence of conformance to ISO 9001-2015 and for future references in case there is change in management or employee. To know more about Clause 7.0 or support, visit our website at www.agfconsultinggroup.com.
As we study about support, let's see more documented information.
Hi guys, Luke here from LH Consulting, back with another video. Today I want to go through another one of the 9001-2015 clauses. That is clause 7.5 and it's entitled Documented Information. Okay, so this clause is split into 3 sub-clauses. So I'm going to take you through 751, 752 and 753, and in that I will explain and break down how to simply and easily comply with this clause in the standard. Okay, so let's start off with 751, and if I just jump back, that is general information. So this is a general clause of the standard. Step 1 to conform with that requirement is that documented information required by 9001 is to be implemented. So Types of documentation, I mean by that, and the three-tier system really is the policy manual, so that's the top level document, sets out your intentions, what you plan to do in terms of the quality management system. There's then your procedures, so written procedures on manufacturing, purchasing, sales, control documented information. Could be a procedure on internal auditing. So think about them procedures, the sub-procedures, so that could be works instructions or that type of thing, training instructions, that type of thing. And finally the forms, so the forms are the documents that allow you to fulfill the requirements of that procedure, sub-procedure, and then the overall intentions basically. Step 2. So what I put here is agreed upon documented information to be effective for the operation of the QMS and for the business. The 9001 standard specifically states it should be appropriate and effective for the standard, but what you need to make sure it does is effective for the quality management system, which conforms to the standard, but even more importantly, make sure it's effective for the operation of the business. Make sure you get it pinned down first, that it works for your business, and then after that, worry about getting the conformity to the 9001 standard as a last resort. It needs to work for you first. Very important. The step 3, I've just kind of took a note here just to give you a bit more information. Documented information to be consistent with the size, risk, complexity of the business, and also the competency of individuals. So for example, works instructions for operatives. It depends how competent your staff are and how detailed and complex the work is. Do you feel you need works instructions? Are you okay with general procedures? It might be the case that you are, but you need to consider that, and you need to consider what documented information is relevant to your business, given the size, the risk of the industry, the complexity of the business, and also the competency of the individuals. Do they know their job? Is it very much based upon their understanding, their past experience, that they can do the job, or do they need instructions on to lift the left tool, put it to the right hand side, and all that? Is that level of detail required? So consider that. Okay, so next is 752, the next subclause, and that is actually entitled creating and updating. So the first step for 752, I've put here, documented information to be labelled appropriately. So by the types of labelling we mean is the title of a document, the form reference number, the issue status, ABC or 123, whatever you like to use, the date that the form was issued of that issue status, and also the author or the QMR, or who is approving that form, who is in charge of that form. Give a bit more detail there. So a good side note there really is if you've got a purchase order and it's been drafted up and approved by the purchasing manager, give the name of the purchasing manager. He's responsible for the purchasing procedure and all the forms within that procedure, obviously underpinned by the quality management representative and the directors or top management of the business. But that shows the linkage and the change of responsibility as it comes down through the system. Step 2, decide upon the format of the documented information. So this is very important. Is it hard copy or electronic? And is it video format? So have you got video procedures? I've heard they work quite well. Or is it just a form? Is it a Word document? So consider that. So what's the format? Is it hard copy manual? Is it electronic manual procedures forms? And is it a video, which can work quite well if you have new people in the business and you're training them up, show them how to do things, how to raise an inquiry all the way through to a finished job? Or is it a Word format? Is it procedures that are in Word? Consider that. 752 step 3, I've just put documented information including any updates, so where you update forms or documented information, to be reviewed by the QMR, and approval, so the approval of that review or that approval is to be documented in a document control register. This is a key aspect of 9001. Make sure you have a control register which allows you to see what is in your system and the issue status, who it's approved by and when it was approved, and if there's any updates, what were the changes. We are going back to old standards, but I find it good to put, if you have changed your purchase order from issue A to issue B, you need to put in there maybe a review comment just to say tab added for customer name or for stock codes, or it could be anything. So make sure that you consider that. And if you want a hand or you need some templates for a document control register, do get in touch and leave a comment below. I can help you out. Okay, so the final subclause is 753, and you have to bear with me here. This is a slightly longer clause, so it is going to get boring, but please do bear with me, and there will be much more exciting videos to come. This is entitled Control of Documented Information. So step 1, decide how the QMS will be accessed. So where, how, and in what format is it stored. So accessibility of the system, very important. 7531, step 2. So decide how the QMS will be stored so it is secure, and also so it cannot be accessed or amended by unauthorized persons. Okay, so a good way I've seen this work is that you would have as a QMR or the top management who need to be amending these files, or the designated person that is amending these files, you would have your own master copy of the QMS system, and then you would have a reference only copy. Might be a hard copy, might be an electronic server copy, which is labeled as such, so reference only, or just put something in there to make sure that is a reference copy, or keep it as a master copy on the server but have it as a password protected document so that people can't go in and just amend things willy-nilly. They need to come through the QMR or whoever is responsible for updating that documentation. So do consider that. And if it's a hard copy, similarly, you'll probably be working off a computer, so make sure that that accessibility and the storage of the QMS is locked down. Give that consideration, and again, if you need help, get in touch. I'll be more than happy to help you with that. Okay, so this is subclause should I say 7532, bit of a mouthful. So step 1 is as above, which we considered. You need to consider the distribution, the access, the retrieval and the use of the QMS or quality management system. So consider then how you're going to distribute it, how you're going to access it, how you're going to retrieve the information if there's changes or amendments, and how you're going to use that QMS, how is it going to function within the business. Very important to plan these areas out, because once you start, it's important to have these foundations in place so it runs smoothly throughout the organisation. It's no good you just knowing where it is and you making all the amendments and changes. It needs to be rolled out across the organisation, regardless of the size. So 7532, step 2, and as above again, bit of a repeat of the other subclauses. Decide upon the storage in order to ensure the protection of the QMS. Very important now, and whether you do backups and stuff like that, make sure that QMS server or the system is also backed up and secured. And 7532, step 3, implement a document control register to monitor version control and planning of changes. So I mentioned it before, key document in ISO9001 systems and also other systems is to have a document control register. So that would keep maybe your pages in your policy manual, your forms and your procedures. It would give them an issue status and a date by which they were approved, and if there's any amendments or changes, you would then up issue them, redate them and reapprove them. Whoever may do that, I don't know, it could be a QMR, it could be your quality manager, it depends on your system, but make sure that's done. And also there, I mentioned before, put a review comment in, say what has changed, so that when we're looking at it we can say, right, this works order or works instruction or job card has been revised. Why was it revised? I forget why it was revised. Oh, it was revised because we added in that we wanted to give a reference to the drawings that we use, or that we wanted to give our specific job number or the customer name. So make sure you put what's changed, because otherwise it's going to be difficult. Also making sure you're obsoleting all copies, but if you want to and if you feel it's beneficial, I can do a video which details how to control documentation, how to make it obsolete, how to control the key documents in your system, so working around that rather than a clause specific video. It'll be more on controlling and distributing, accessing, storage of the quality management system. So let me know if that's something you're interested in. Be more than happy to produce that. And 7532, step 4, I promise there's not much longer now. Define where and for how long key documents are stored and also filed. So put in purchase orders a year, or put in training records 10 years, or liability insurance 30, 40 years, whatever it is now. But make sure you are putting the key document, where it's stored, and for how long you store it. So it's retention and disposition periods and methods. So you're defining that. And that could be in your control register, or it could be anywhere in the system. Just make sure you do document that, because the auditor will want to see that. And it's also important for you as an organisation to know how long you keep documentation and how it's filed. Is it electronic? Is it hard copy? Is it in a filing cabinet? Or is it on the company server? So very important to document that. And again, if you need help, drop a comment below. And finally, thank you for watching. LH
Yes, Clause 8, operation.
In today's micro-learning video, let's talk about Clause 8, Operation. Every organization needs an operating plan in order to function. ISO9001-2015 makes it easier for you by giving out a guide where you can lay down your existing standard operating procedures. Clause 8 is composed of operational and planning control, requirements for production and services, design and development for products and services, control of externally provided processes, products and services, production and service provision, release of products and services, and control of non-conforming outputs. Let's get to know each clause one by one. Clause 8.1, Operational and Planning Control. This clause requires operation to be conducted through processes that are planned and controlled regardless of whether the organization or an outside party performs the process. A criteria is determined and established for acceptance. The identification of resources needed to achieve conformity is required. In view of this, the organization shall plan, implement, and control the processes needed to meet the requirements for the provision of products and services, and to implement the actions determined in Clause 6 by determining the requirements for the products and services, establishing criteria for the processes and the acceptance of products and services, determining the resources needed to achieve conformity to the product and service requirements, implementing control of the processes in accordance with the criteria, and determining, maintaining, and retaining documented information to the extent necessary. Clause 8.2, Requirements for products and services. Customers are primarily the end users of your product, but also include intermediaries who may be internal or external and who integrate your product into theirs. This also includes dealers and distributors who market and sell your product or the integrated product. You need to consider feedback from all these customers to determine whether or not you have met their specified and perceived requirements. Customer feedback or satisfaction is the first tool required by this standard to gauge the effectiveness of the quality management system. This clause requires you to gather and analyze information as to what extent you meet these requirements from the customer's perspective. Clause 8.3, Design and Development of Products and Services. Design and development activities needed for products and services are required to be planned and controlled through an established, implemented, and maintain process. This process may be used for both products and services and for associated processes. The organization shall establish, implement, and maintain a design and development process that is appropriate to ensure the subsequent provision of products and services. Clause 8.4, for the control of externally provided processes, products and services have to be in conformity to the operational requirements of the organization. This ensures that the externally provided processes, products and services do not adversely affect the organization's ability to consistently deliver conforming products and services to its customers. It shall also take into consideration the potential impact of the externally provided processes, products and services on the organization's ability to consistently meet customer and applicable statutory and regulatory requirements, and the effectiveness of the controls applied by the external provider. Clause 8.5. Production and service provision provides a list of control requirements that you may use, if applicable to your business. Identify and control all operation process. Show the interaction of these processes with other processes. The organization shall implement production and service provision under controlled conditions. In addition to this, Clause 8.5 also looks into identification and traceability, property belonging to customers or external providers, preservation and post-delivery activities, and lastly, control of changes to ensure the continuity of conformity to the requirements. Clause 8.6, release of products and services. The organization shall implement planned arrangements at appropriate stages to verify that the product and service requirements have been met before it is released. It is important to identify, monitor and measure product or service characteristics to verify conformity to the requirements. These requirements may come from your customer, your organization, regulatory and industry sources. You must plan what characteristics to measure, type of measurements, what measurement device to use, how often to measure, sample size, acceptance criteria, and records needed for each product or product type. Lastly, Clause 8 also talks about control of non-conforming outputs in Clause 8.7. ISO 9001-2015, Clause 8.7 applies to processes, products, and services that do not conform to customer requirements, applicable regulatory requirements, or your own organization requirements. Non-conformities may relate to suppliers and outsourced work, your own organizational activities, or products shipped to customers. The organization shall take appropriate action based on the nature of the non-conformity and its effect on the conformity of products and services. This also applies to non-conforming products and services detected after delivery of products, during or after the provision of services. The organization shall deal with non-conforming outputs through correction, segregation, containment, return, or suspension of provision of products and services, informing the customer and obtaining authorization or acceptance under concession. To know more about Clause 8.0 or operation, visit our website at www.agfconsultinggroup.com.
Let's see, design and development.
Hi guys, Luke here from ISO Consulting, back with another video. Today I want to take you through another one of the ISO 9001 2015 clauses. That is clause 8.3, and that's actually entitled Design and Development of Products and Services. Okay, so as I previously mentioned, this video is going to take you through clause 8.3 of ISO 9001. So as we have done with previous videos, I'm going to take you through it step by step and hopefully make compliance easy. That's what I'm aiming to do with this video. So if we jump straight in. So let's start off with the overall clause requirement, and really the overall clause requirement here, which I briefly summarised, is to ensure that design and development of products and services is conducted in a controlled and effective manner. Now really what we mean about this is that we are both simplifying but structuring our design process, so making sure that the relevant bits are in there are to make sure that we are doing the design work correctly. In a bit more detail then, what does that actually mean and what does the clause cover? So basically it covers the planning of a design, so firstly the concept ideas, the inputs to design, so anything that you would put into the design in order to make it work, could be specifications or discussions with clients or meetings with the team, the controls that we put in place, so anywhere where we control the design, the output, so what comes out of it, is it a sketch, is it a final drawing, and then any changes to that design, so where the design has been approved and then there's a change, how that process is managed. So it's kind of mapping this out, explaining what you need to have in your quality management system, especially if you are including design. Okay, so first of all, let's break it down into the sub-clauses. So 831 is design and development general. Now what I've said here is I've just said see the overall clause requirement slide, so I've kind of explained it there. This is a general clause, doesn't ask anything of you really, it's just to kind of give you a brief introduction into the clause. So nothing really to add there. Now next bit is design and development planning. So when looking at the planning stage, I've just said consider here, how can you ensure your design process is effectively planned? Consider the complexity of the design, that will then depend on the planning you put in. The process stages or reviews that are undertaken. The verification and the validation, and these can both be kind of the same thing. The responsibility, so who's responsible in your organisation for design and development? Is it a design manager? Is it someone that's using AutoCAD? So consider that. The resource requirements, do they need BIM modelling? Do they need AutoCAD software? Do we need to have a couple of people rather than one? Do we need an administrator to help keep up the review checklist, etc.? Interfaces, so interfaces could be AutoCAD system, the interface between the designer and what he's trying to produce. The involvement of the customer or the user, so if you're designing software, you might have a user that's giving you feedback and then developing that software, whereas for the customer you may be saying it needs to be to this spec, so you're tweaking your design, or we want that tree over there, or we want a 3-story building, not a 2-story building. The list goes on and on, so it's having involvement from them so you can get the right output. Adaptation, obviously adapting something and how you'll adapt it. The control or the documented information that's relevant to the process. And control really in design is something which is usually managed quite well, drawing issue status, etc. Documented information requirements, so what documents do you need in that procedure, in that design development procedure, to ensure that you are getting the right output at the end, so the controls to bring the output. Okay, so let's talk about some inputs. So what would we classify as design and development inputs? So we could say specifications, we use customer specifications or our own specifications to say this is what we're expecting. We're asking what information is required to start the design and development. So it could be a spec or it could be something else. We're using past experience or lessons learned, so where we've got someone that's greatly experienced, they're looking at it saying, hang on, we need to be using X, Y, Z, that doesn't work too well, this works well, how about tweaking it to this? So that's from past experience, so we can use that. Any statutory or legal requirements where there's legislation which we have to follow, that should be followed. Codes of practice and standards, again. A risk assessment, so do we need to do a risk assessment at the end, or this will be more relevant to the start, so do we need a risk assessment? And what happens if things go wrong? Conflicting input, so a specification says one thing but then the legislation says another. and then also the documented information required to show that the relevant inputs have been looked at. Okay, so design and development controls. What we're really looking at here is how can you ensure the design process is effectively controlled. So one thing we can do is we can define the expected outputs or results. We can do a review of design, or we can do the issues and logged and rectified verification. So we can make sure any issues design are logged, verified, closed out, etc. Finished goods are checked versus the design, so that could be validation. So when we've built the goods, we check it against the drawing. Is it correct? Or we sing it from the same hymn sheet in terms of design and what's actually been developed. And then finally also consider the documented information required to have controls in place. And then we've got design and development outputs. So consider whether you have met your defined input requirements. So have the input and the controls led you to the required output. The adequacy for subsequent processes. So consider whether you can then use that output to then do XYZ extra. So does it fit into the system? Define your acceptance criteria. So we say if it matches the drawing, it's acceptable. If it meets this criteria checklist at goods out inspection, it's acceptable. So define the acceptance criteria. Your monitoring and measuring requirements and the required characteristics to be defined. So the safety of the product, the intended purposes, so not to use it for something which isn't necessarily its intended purpose. So that needs to be defined. So we mean write it down somewhere. And finally, any changes there. So I've just put consider identifying, reviewing and controlling changes to design development. So you may have already produced something but you want to change it. Consider the impact of it and change it. Reviewing things, so updating them, reviewing them. These are all things that need to be considered. And where there is a change in a design, it needs to be controlled properly. And I think I used the example in the past of issuing a drawing out, which is issue A to the manufacturing facility, something being changed by the customer, meaning the drawing needs to be up issue to B, and then we need to make sure that gets out into the workshop. A is replaced, obsoleted, and then B is shown to all involved in that job so that they know they need to be working off that. So that's an example of where you would change a design development, making sure that that design change is reviewed and why have we changed it and what the impacts of the change. So consider that as well. And obviously that's the end of the video. Thank you for watching, I appreciate you.
And let's check control of externally provided processes, products and service.
Hi guys, it's Luke here from LH Consulting, back with another video. Today I want to take you through clause 8.4 of ISO 9001 2015, and that's actually entitled Control of Externally Provided Processes, Products and Services. Recording myself in the corner of this video today as I have had some technical difficulties with previous videos and syncing the voice with my lips, so I'm working on that and that will come back in future videos. But if we jump straight in, so first of all, as always, I just want to run you through the overall clause requirement of clause 8.4. So the overall clause requirement in my own speak is really to ensure that where external suppliers or contractors or anything that is outsourced are used to supply products and services, then these are adequately controlled. So this could be maintenance or calibration activities, it could be something you send out for powder coating or shot blasting, anything which is externally provided in terms of supplier of a product or a service or a contractor, then this clause is about making sure that they are controlled to an adequate level. Now this clause is quite basic really, so we're looking at the type of control, and we're also looking at the importance or the level of the control which we put upon a certain external supplier or external contractor. The second subclause here is information. So that's information that we pass to the external supplier and that also we expect from the external supplier. So it's getting them requirements in up front. So as we said, the first clause, or the first subclause should I say, is external providers general. So as always, see the overall clause requirement slide. There's nothing to add here. Basically that's repetition on what my overall clause requirement is and the overall understanding really and breakdown of that clause 8.4. As always, may I add, if you have any questions or queries, do leave a comment below. I'll be more than happy to help you, and it will be a quick turnaround on the reply. The first subclause that we're really going to get our teeth into is clause or subclause 842, and that is external providers, and as we said, it's entitled type and extent of control. So when looking to comply with this subclause, I've just said that you need to consider a wide variety of things here, and I'll read them out now. But when you're thinking about this subclause, just think of the type of controls and also the level and importance of controls you need to place on a certain contractor. If it's someone that does something very minor, of very little significance to you, the controls that you put on them will be no way near someone that's a critical supplier that could affect your ability to supply your quality product or service, as we've said below there. So think about that and consider the processes remain inside the control of the QMS. So all processes which contribute to the output of the product or service must remain inside the control of the quality management system. Controls surrounding the external provider and outputs. So think about the controls you're going to put around that external provider. I put here verification and checking activities, audits, and we've got a few others down there below. Some examples: approved suppliers list, questionnaire review. We'll go through that a bit more detail shortly. Think about or question the importance of the external provider, and also the risk that if they didn't provide you a quality product / service, what impact would that have upon your quality management system and as you as a business, and consider mitigating that risk. This new standard is all about risk mitigation. We have done a video on that clause if you want to look back at that. And effectiveness of controls put upon them. So considering the risk, consider the importance of the product or service they provide, make sure you put good controls in place and make sure they're effective, and monitor the effectiveness of the controls. If you have controls in place and there's 50 supplier issues out of 70 orders with a certain contractor, them controls probably aren't working. So monitor the effectiveness of the controls you're putting upon them. May link it to your complaints procedure, NCR procedure, or non-conformity procedure. And if there are a wide variety of issues with a supplier, maybe review the controls you put upon them. If you aren't really putting any controls upon them and you just say, yeah, we'll use you, and if there's an issue then we'll look at it, but there's been 50 issues and you haven't looked at it, you're not really doing the job properly there. And I've just put here, ensure they do not affect your ability to supply quality product and service. And some examples of type and extent of control I've seen work well is to have an approved suppliers list, where suppliers are put onto the list where they meet a certain criteria, and that criteria is for you to decide. It could be the fact that they have certification to 9001. They may have to do a trial order where they meet your requirements. There could be a variety of other ways. They may have to pass an audit, an initial questionnaire, so you might want to send out a questionnaire to them for them to fill in. where you could say, have you got this, have you got that, when's the last time you had an issue, blah 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 blah, and carry on like that. And then also, it's all well and good putting them on the approved suppliers list, getting them to fill in questionnaires, maybe doing an audit on site, but you've got to review the effectiveness of that. The business may, or the supplier may have increased his workload by 3 times, and he's no longer got the capacity to do the work, or the quality is slipping. Similarly, his company may have or be close to be going bust, and there again the capacity is shorter or lower, so you need to review that on a consistent basis, as well as getting a good control or a good check on that supplier initially. So hopefully that helps a bit. And the next subclause is 843. So this is just external providers and information. So this is what you are communicating to the external provider or with the external provider. And I've just put some ideas here. So, requirements for products or services. What is it you require from the product or service? Make that clear up front in your orders, and make sure it matches with the quotation, that you are getting what you need for the money you're paying or the trade you're doing. The approval criteria, so make sure they know what is expected of them up front in terms of approval. Do they need to be X number of employees or X number of turnover to work with you? So make sure that approval criteria is nailed down. The competency requirements, for example, if we're talking about air conditioning in the UK, we need to make sure that the engineers who are servicing our air conditioning are competent to do so. So that will relate to the services or the products that you are trying to outsource, and make sure you're aware of the competency requirements so that you know that the person you've chosen to do the job is able to do it. Expected interactions, so whether you expect a report off them or a video that they've produced for your business, make sure the expected interactions are nailed up front. Performance monitoring of external provider, make sure they're communicated on their performance and we're communicating on the performance. Good time to do that is at management review. We say, hey, who are our suppliers, how are they performing, how many issues are raised against them, are they doing okay, are they not doing okay, and if they're not, what action are we going to take? Are we going to, as we said before, increase or improve the control surrounding that supplier, or are we going to look at maybe looking at another supplier and leaning back on the work we give to that supplier? So that's the discussion you need to be having. Definitely an annual management review, but depending on your size, it may be a monthly, a quarterly thing that you need to introduce, is looking at your suppliers. Just put a supplier site verification or validation checks. So if applicable, I put here audits, so it could be supplier audits, meetings with the supplier. And I've also put some examples here, good times to communicate information, what you require, as we said before, is during going out for quotes or getting quotes from suppliers, seeing what they entail, what you get for your money, comparing them like for like. And also when you send out your purchase order or an order for a particular product or service, make sure you define what it is you want, and don't be careful to give verbal orders for things where you need specific results. If you use the same supplier for 20 years, fair enough, but if it's something you haven't used before, make sure you nail it down, that order, the requirements, what you expect of them, when you expect it by, and how you expect it presented, and that should go a long way. Apart from that, guys, that is the end of the
This is clause 8.4 operation. Let's wrap up this class and see you next class. Thank you.